Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Aaron Connole, and once again, welcome back to another movie battleground. First things first, because we are airing this a day early, tomorrow is Thanksgiving. So, to all of you Americans who celebrate Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving. I hope that we're giving you a bit of an early present by bringing you Movie Battleground a day early. And this one is certainly an intriguing movie battleground in the 0-1 bracket. We have the man who deems himself movie taking on the man who deems himself movie hero. We have Chris Diaz taking on Jordan Anderson. Chris, in his return debut, as obviously he was not a rookie, took on Alec Miller in a match that obviously saw Alec move on to play Jeremy, which is almost a worse fate than losing to some. Obviously, we'll see how that one goes when it airs. And in the case of Jordan, he made his proper debut against Malcolm Lay. It was a very close match. It was a very tight match, but Jordan, just the lack of experience, I think, was what bit him right there in the end, and he came out the loser. And so they're back tonight to get their first victories in Movie Battleground and obviously progress further on into the tournament. And I, for one, am very interested to see where this goes. But with that said, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's get it going. Introducing first, with a record of no wins and one defeat, he is the man who calls himself movie hero. He is Jordan Anderson.
Hey,
That is
buddy.
not Jordan Anderson. That
Oh
is
yeah.
Austin Howell. What the hell is
Excuse
okay?
me, Aaron. It's Pez. When I'm in the battleground, it's Pez. As you can see
Yes,
on
excuse
the
me.
name right here, it's Pez. Okay, get it right first of all. But hey, buddy, how you doing? No, I'm not
Good.
Jordan Anderson. No, Jordan
The
Anderson
fuck?
is my co-host over on the Movie Hero Network. Yeah, we are Tuesdays and Fridays, tournament fights, tier ranker fights, all that good
Stop
stuff.
plugging your shit.
Uh, well, I'll plug whatever I want to right now, Aaron. It's my camera time. You understand? I'm here. I'm going to say what I'm going to say. So, Aaron, I'm here to air out some grievances. I mean, I'm here to have a little powwow with you. See, Jordan's not going to be here tonight. He's decided to kind of put a
He's not.
boycott on the show because of he had some issues with his last match and things he asked you to do that you didn't do, and now well, you're kind of on his shit list, kind of like you are with me as well, and a few of the other people here in the battleground. So we're going to do things a little differently tonight.
Are we now? We are going to do things a little differently tonight. First off, I want to say thank you to your buddy. I like the plug for your channel and the professionalism of
Hmm.
giving the host and producer fair warning of him not being here. That was nice.
Hmm.
Second off, who's we? What's we? Because if Jordan's not here and no
Well,
one else from your channel gets involved, who's we?
Well, I'll get to that just a second. See, I was thinking about just coming in here in his place and mopping the floor with Chris Diaz and having a little fun, but I figured that'd be a little too easy. See, I've already had two matches here in the battleground, and I'm already going to win Match of the Year, Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, GQ's Man of the Year, People's Sexiest Man Alive, Time Magazine's Person of the Year, et cetera, just through my
Whatever
two
you say,
matches.
buddy.
But I figured that'd be too easy. Put on the ratings, give you a little bump. No, we've come up with a better solution, and by we I mean see, I got this new guy I've been talking to online who also has some grievances. I'm not alone tonight, by the way. Hey, Matt Beer, you're in here. Why don't you get in here, Matt? Hey,
Hey,
buddy,
buddy.
Matt, amigo,
Hey,
what's going on, partner?
buddy.
My
How's
buddy
it
Matt
going?
Beer.
Yeah,
Oh
Matt here
man,
from
man.
Hey, Aaron, buddy. How's it going?
Oh, you sound happy. What's
I'm
up,
very
man?
happy. So, here's the thing. Still a little upset how you handled the whole Midi match with me, basically not giving me any time to prep, saying, "Hey,
Mm.
you're gonna play in this match. We're gonna throw you in." And I was like, "Okay, cool. Do I have like a week or two to prep?" You're like, "Nah, we're gonna do it today." And I was like, "Okay, whatever."
What?
And you threw me in there. So guess what, Aaron? It's time for a little bit of payback.
Payback. Oh man,
Yeah.
this is whew, man.
See,
Aaron.
here's the thing.
Yeah, see, we came up with a solution. I mean,
Since you're doing all these heinous things to competitors, we've decided to kind of get back at you a little bit. Jordan's not going to be competing. I'm not going to be competing, and Austin's not going to be competing. You're going to be competing today against Chris Diaz. So buckle up, Aaron. It's time to get the show on the road.
Okay, I don't even know where to break that one down. First off, thank you for being my partner in YouTube for a number of years just to turn around and do this bullshit. The first guy that walks in
It's
that
no
sweet
problem.
talks you decide to pair up with him. That's
It's
fucking nice
completely
of you.
justified. I mean, you understand my argument, right? I mean, you have screwed a lot of people, and maybe Matt the
I
most
mean,
by getting in the
I
match with
understood
no
your
prep
arguments in your match
and
against
you know.
Chad when you lost fair and square. So I mean, let's.
Hey, and
I'm gonna cut you off because this is still my fucking show, and I'm gonna say no. Why the fuck would I listen to either of you and do this when it's my show?
Well,
We can just. Chris is malleable. He'll do this anytime I want. We'll reschedule. I'll put Jordan in his place, and we'll
you
come
know,
back. This will never
no.
see a fight
you
again.
certainly could do that, Aaron. Aaron, you certainly could make that decision. You could postpone the show. You could cut the stream off right now. I would advise you not to do that, though. You see, after my last match, remember I had that thing where I had my legal team contact you, and you found out how real that was. So if you don't do this, Aaron, like if you don't put yourself in the competitor seat tonight, my team is going to immediately put a cease and desist order on anything Movie Battleground and file an injunction against you, and your show will just kind of fade into the black hole of YouTube. There it goes. Bye bye. See, it's just going to fade away, and all the views, and bye bye. There it goes. So, I mean, you definitely could do that. That's your choice. It's your option. You see, since you're going to be, competing tonight, your buddy Matt there, he's going to be hosting, so he's going to run the show now. So he's going to run the show tonight to make sure it's fair and there's no shenanigans, and also to make sure there's no shenanigans. I'm inserting myself as a judge tonight, Aaron. So no easy points tonight. No getting points like in some of your points tonight, Aaron. So strap yourself in, buddy. I'm
If
looking
I
forward
say
to
yes,
watching you
will
sweat.
shut up?
Oh, sure. So I got my little pad here. I'm ready to judge.
Okay.
So
yes.
how about we get this
Bye-bye.
thing going?
Okay, fine. I'll play your little game. Before I hand it over, I guess introducing my opponent now with a record of 0-1, Chris Movie Diaz.
Yeah, Chris. Let's go. Yeah. Woo!
What the hell did I jump on into?
I don't know, man. I'll figure things out with you afterwards, but this is kind of the situation we have, so we'll play. I guess with that, Matt, go ahead and tell them how the show works.
All right, so how the show works is we're going to have a 2-minute. Oh, there we go. First, there, I didn't know there was a graphic. Here we go. So, this is the first player to 3 points wins the match because of the best of 5. So, we got that each round is worth 1 point. 3 points in a round, win by knockout. I think game, but we'll go with it. After a tie, round 4 activates round 5, the blind round.
You've been doing
I was
this
reading
for
it.
months. Jesus Christ. Okay, here's the next one, Matt.
Here we go. Rounds 1 through 4. Questions received prior to the match for debate preparation. 60-second opening argument is how you guys will start. Then you got a 2-minute solo pitch after you guys gave your 1-minute thing. Then you're going to have a 4-minute open debate. And then you'll close it out with 60 seconds. And then the judges will decide who wins the point.
Okay, well, since I've run out of graphics for you to read, I'll do the rest of it before I let you take over.
Thank you. I
want to say thank you to the judges in the back who are having to watch this shit happen. Haven Pendergast, Andrea Malabag, and I guess Austin Howell is back there too now. And the other part of this that Matt's also probably not aware of is Chris was spun into the favorite slot prior to the start of this match. He chose to go first on questions 1 and 3. Which we will keep. So that means I will go first on questions 2 and 4. All right, let's get this shit over with. Go ahead, Matt. Read question number 1 if you know how to locate that.
I found it. I have the banners currently up on my end. So, question 1 is, what Apple TV Plus original film has been the best so far? We're going to go over to Chris for your 1-minute opening. The timer will begin when you start talking.
So we live in a time where we got many streaming services. We got Netflix, we got Hulu, we got Amazon, and now we got Apple TV. Apple TV has released a bunch of good movies so far, but they have released something this year that's sure to be an Oscar contender, and also one of the best coming age movies recently. Coda. Coda is a film starring Emilia Jones, who is a Christian with a contractor in Massachusetts who, in family, her family is deaf, so he like to purchase speak for them. He's the only person that is not deaf. And she also wants to be a singer. This is a touching comedy movie with plenty of laugh, some really hot wet gut punch moment, and a clever comedy that you don't really see. And to get it from the perspective of someone whose family is deaf and how he deal with being translated, really unique perspective. I don't go into detail how this is, but this is one of the best films Apple ever done. But like director Cheyenne Helen, and it's definitely one of the best movie years so far. One of the best Apple TV so far. We'll go more into my debate and round two.
Alrighty, and that will be your time. Now we're going to move on to Aaron. Aaron, your time will begin when you start talking.
I just want to say, you spent less time complaining and then paying attention. You know you don't have to turn your camera on every time you speak.
Well, hey, you know what? I think they need to see my face.
Okay, let's get this shit over with. All right, Apple TV. It is a streaming service that's run by the cell phone company that owns all of our lives, that has distributed and released movies. And since Chris went with probably the most obvious pick, since it's the only film they've made that's been mentioned anywhere near the Oscars, I'm going to go with the one that I think actually succeeds the best on a streaming device, which is Greyhound. This is a film that came out last year. It stars Tom Hanks, and it is a World War II story about the captain of a ship basically attempting to evade German U-bombers the whole time. And I believe that this is the best film they've made because not only is it an extremely quality film for all the reasons I'll get into when I have more time remaining, but it's also because in terms of streaming, when you are just sitting at home on your couch wanting to watch a film, there is usually certain types of films that appeal to you more. And I think Greyhound fits perfectly into that box. But as I said, I will go over that when I have more time to actually complete a sentence.
Alrighty, and that is your time. Now we're going to go back to Chris. Chris, your time will begin when you start talking.
And then Dakota is one of the rare coming age film where it takes from the perspective of a deaf family, and the main character is person to do the speak for family. She's not her deaf herself. The director can use beautiful technique that like use the silence a beautiful moment to the end of the film during the slow concert. It's just from that perspective to no sound, so he look at everybody's smile reaction. And the other thing because he can't understand what she's saying, it leads to the beautiful thing later on we have to actually think for him, so he can read him out while she's singing at the same time. It's just a beautiful film. Flight culture, Daniel Durant, and Molly Monter actually, I can't remember with it, actually. Wonderful, well done as the actress in this film. Very great representation. Also, it takes the conventional, like, cliche and throw them out, where the person had a heart for the butter, but that gets resolved very quickly in a very unique, funny way. But it also makes you interact with the family, like, you interact with what's going on. The teacher is very funny, he also puts on, makes you something laugh. But how, on the other hand, suffer for the fact that under 90 men, hard to besides Tommy, how to really care what's going on because they don't spend a lot of time with the children and making you invested in them. They give a brief scene in the beginning of the film with Tommy, wanting to marry this girl before he go off to war. And it's a nice thing, but I just didn't give a crap about the character. I thought he had the action tonight. The editing was rough at that point. Like a couple quickly editing that was giving me a headache, and every time you get a time slot of like day after day until the end, right, got annoying after a while. I read it at the film at a certain time, restoring the character. Probably when you have like also Stephen Graham, who is a terrific character actor in it, and he better get lots to do. Like even when like the chef died, it didn't really get emotional. That's not what they love road movie, and I say every day. So they was a unique movie that you also don't get a lot.
And that is your time. Okay. Now we're going to go to Aaron. Your time will begin when you start speaking.
Okay, so you said that Greyhound was only around 80 minutes, like it was a bad thing. I'm actually going to emphasize that that is one of the strengths of the film. Greyhound tells you a complete, enthralling story in about 82 minutes if you take out credits. And that is a strength with streaming. More and more and more, we've seen longer and longer films go to streaming. And if you look at what, there's not many statistics available, obviously, because they keep that a lot to the chest. But even just speaking with people, films like The Irishman, or even this year with Zack Snyder's Justice League, they either don't get finished or they need to be watched in more than one sitting because they're so long. Whereas Greyhound is efficient. It's 80 minutes. It's in and out. It tells you a complete story with a beginning, middle, and end. In terms of Tom Hanks's character, I actually think the movie does give you reasons to care about its characters and moments without having to really expound upon them. Yeah, of course, Coda is a character piece, so it's literally giving more time to its characters. Whereas Greyhound makes you care about Tom Hanks's character with just little bits and pieces and moments, whether it's that opening scene with Elizabeth Shue, where all you need from that scene is to establish that he has somebody at home who loves him, somebody that he wants to fight to get home to, and it gives you a reason to support him because they end that scene with he's going to marry her once he's home from war, and that's all you need to support him. Whether it's his little relationships with Stephen Graham or the likes of Rob Morgan as his servant isn't quite the right word, but he's like the food, the almost like the chef on the ship. And you get these little moments between them where you see that Rob Morgan's character really cares about Tom Hanks. And so when eventually he is killed in one of the attacks, it's those little things that really bring forth the emotionality of it. Also, for a streaming film, the movie has an incredible budget. As in the budget is on the screen. It looks really good. The action set pieces, for mostly being you just watching other ships kind of move around and play with each other and try and maneuver away from missiles, it looks really good. It also has an incredible score that constantly keeps you on the edge of your seat as it's moving. And I guess at that point I'll stop speaking because we're about to go in it anyways.
Yep, and that is time. Alrighty. Now that that's done, you guys have your 4-minute open discussion. Whenever one of you guys speaking, your time will start.
So, but don't get me wrong, I think Greyhound is a good movie. I don't feel like I've seen it so many freaking times, especially for Tommy, for stuff like Saving Private Ryan and other films. And it felt like the same thing I've seen before. And also, I didn't really give a crap about a lot of the characters. A lot of these shows that came off like really one-dimensional. There wasn't really much invested. Timmy Graham, what did you know? Really good character actor, a bunch of stuff. And Tom Hanks is just like the same type of character I've seen in Saving Private Ryan and other war movies where it's just like he's someone who comes from a different background, going to the person that met. He wants to get married to this, so it's just the same cliche. But Kodak thing, it's rare to see a movie that actually used the deaf community in such a way, clever way. But I think the family are perfect cast. Molly Martin as the mom and Craig Fisher as the dad are beautifully well done. They get fun woman. They also get emotional woman. The bedroom thing that they kind of discuss the daughter face.
So I'm gonna cut in here because you're talking about the parents in Coda, and they're actually one of my biggest weaknesses with this film. This movie is supposed to be this coming of age, feel-good story where at the end of the movie you're meant to support this family kind of coming together and supporting each other. The problem is throughout most of the movie I have a very hard time supporting these parents because quite honestly they're fucking assholes. Yes, they are deaf and they happen to have a daughter who can speak, but there are multiple moments in this movie, especially with the mother, where they view her as more of a piece that is important to them, like a tool you'd use, rather than value her as a daughter. At every step they want to tear down her dreams, and they only rectify that at the end when the movie needs to wrap up for its happy resolution. None of it feels natural. It just, they have to do it so the movie ends happily. But more than once, the mother is happy to just let her daughter give up on her dreams so that she can stay and help them build their business.
But the thing is, a struggling parent, the mother also, doing what Pastor does. They have that great thing in the bedroom. They start talking and, they say, she talked about, when she gave birth to the daughter, that she really that she would be deaf and she was blind. And it was a great bonding moment, and you had to protect the mother. The father had to take on, he very much started, that the dream would perish, that, her dream would not come true, and it would lead to disappointment. And that is the brilliant moment toward middle half to the end of the film, or the father watching the content, and the great moment on no sound, just seeing his reaction, seeing the parents smiling, seeing the daughter smiling, getting that realization that she had the potential, that she really did it. Like that beautiful moment on the trunk when he had
but those scenes that you're talking about,
and, with the
whether
brother,
it's
like, hey, sorry, but like
well,
with the
these
brother,
scenes that you're
him
you
struggling,
can't have all 4 minutes, Chris. These scenes that you're talking about are playing into exactly what I'm saying. All the three scenes you've mentioned all happened within the last 20 minutes of this film. The entire movie, these parents are assholes and view their daughter as nothing more than a tool. And it's only when the script says, oh, we're flipping into the third act, we got to start to resolve, is when they finally start to open their mind up and see their daughter. But even then, to me, it is very contrived. Like, that mother sits like, it's contrived.
When the parents are in the bedroom and they talk and they don't come off them, they worry that the daughter going to be set up for disappointment. Like, and they having that conversation.
Right, but that's but so here's my problem with that is shitty parenting. If you cannot hear, you should not be judging your daughter one way or the other. In the mom's mind, she has prejudged her daughter as being a bad singer because in her mind that justifies her wanting to have her daughter stay home with her. If you can't hear, if you've never heard somebody sing, why would you actively assume they're bad? They could be bad and not they might be great. They're not good parents. They're not supportive until the script tells them that they need to be. And that's the biggest issue with the film is its entire emotional crux is just not there until it needs to exist in order for the film to resolve.
And that's going to be time. All righty, guys. This is the time to wrap everything up into one big old present. We're going to go to Chris first to finalize his argument. The time will begin when you start talking.
Main thing, the parents go through the songs, but it's typical any parent teaching movie. It's typical saying, and they get growing up. They go through the emotional journey with the parents, and worrying about the daughter's future. That they worry that they will not survive their own house, the daughter, because the daughter is the only interpreter they have living in Manchester, Massachusetts. Don't forget the beautiful moment with the daughter that she worried about her same voice, she worried about who she is. You get it around when she teaches by Nelly to bed. The arc is like the more confident she gets, the more she cannot. The brother going through the arc around that. He wants to be helpful, but the parent wants to rely more on it. The bunch of arc beautifully conveyed together. And Denise Howard beautifully portrayed this out with the both side now thing with the sign language to the end of that scene when she's auditioning for the school that she wants to get into. And she uses sign language at the same time. It's a great use of the great coming age for laughter, great acting, great directing. And she has to get invested. You have to parent a training, but that one parent on everything.
And that's going to be time. All righty. Now we're going to go to Aaron. Aaron, the time will begin when you start talking.
Okay, Coda is a fine film. It is a good film. I'm not going to knock that because I'm not going to shit on something that's not. But the biggest problem with Coda and why it's not the best is it's a film that is completely centered around the emotional culmination of this family, but it's an emotional culmination and direction that does not make sense for the story you're watching prior to it until the movie tells you, oh, this needs to start making sense. So we're going to go in this direction. Greyhound is a very good World War II film. It has great action. It has some really good acting from Tom Hanks. It has a great score, great cinematography. For a streaming film, which are known for having a lesser budget, it just looks really good. Even on just the TV, it looks really good. And the only knock that you had against my film in this entire thing is that it looks like stuff that we've seen before, which I don't even think is really that much of a criticism. If this is what Tom Hanks is good at, then let him stick to it. I mean, he wrote the damn script himself. He clearly knows where his strengths lie, and this movie played 100% into that. All of that with the 82-minute runtime is why Greyhound is the best film they have produced for their streaming service.
And that is going to be time in the end of round one. Good job, everybody. Now we're going to bring in our judges so they can give their opinion. So today we have Austin, Haven, and Andrea to judge you guys. Okay, so if you don't get the point, don't feel too bad. We're going to go to Austin first because he's right next to me. Austin, who's going to get your point and why?
Well, Chris did a great job of really knocking down Greyhound early with the supporting characters that are wasted and the runtime and things like that. And I feel like Aaron never really had any clapbacks for that. He also just propped up his movie a little bit stronger than Aaron did. So my point's going to go to Chris.
Okay. Then we're going to go to Andrea. Andrea, who are you going to give the point to and why?
This is closer than I expected it to be. But I would have to give my point to Aaron because I believe that he was able to knock down something that Chris wasn't able to answer back. So I have to give my point in that sense to Aaron.
Okay. Now we're going to go to Haven. Haven, you are the decider in this one. Who's going to get the point and why?
Runtime doesn't matter how good a film is or not. So that was kind of irrelevant. I don't know why Chris brought that up. I'm giving my point to Aaron. He talked better about his movie. He mentioned the fact that Tom Hanks wrote it. The great soundtrack to it. In the movie, the plot moving, and he just kept hammering the fact that Aaron was just talking about a couple scenes in the movie and didn't really give us a feel of why should anybody actually go watch the movie. I mean, I learned more about the movie from Aaron than I did from Chris, and Chris was the one saying that was the greatest film. So I'm gonna give it to Aaron.
Okay. And just like that, Aaron is going to take a 1-0 lead. So now we're going to bring back the competitors and we're going to move on to question number 2. So our second question is in the category of comedies. And the question is, what is the best comedy released in the 2000s? Oh, there we go. Wrong one. Boop. There we go. All right. So since Chris went first on the last one, we're going to go to Aaron on this one. So Aaron, you will go first. What to you is the best comedy and why?
Okay, so this to me is a very instinctive answer. The best comedy of the 2000s, in my opinion, is The 40-Year-Old Virgin. This is a film that came out in 2005. It stars Steve Carell, Paul Rudd, Seth Rogen, Romany Malco, Catherine Turner or Keener, I can't remember. Either way, and it was directed by Judd Apatow. It was his directorial debut after years of producing films and working on television. And the reason I think this is the best comedy of all time is because I think comedy is at its best when it's relatable. And I feel like there's nothing more relatable than the idea of the social anxiety and social awkwardness that is centered around the idea of sex. And using that through the lens of a man who has reached the point of 40 years of age and has never had sex is a way of amplifying that relatability in a very funny manner without completely exploiting it and using it to bring a lot of heart to the film. And obviously the clock's about to run down, so 40-Year-Old Virgin.
All righty. Now we're going to go on to Chris. Chris, what do you think is the best comedy release in the 2000s and why? The time will begin when you start talking.
So the 2000 is a really great decade for comedy, and I think he named one. I didn't name another one. Rather than the early 2000s, but everyone won a big comedy after big comedy. I think it's the one that is the most quotable, character that you remember the most. And just like some of the most funny scenes in any comedy I've seen from 2004, Anchorman the Legend of Mark Becky. This is a film that this kind of classic. You got like Paul Rudd, you got David Kushner, you got D. Crowd, you got a bunch of other people in it, and it's just like Ed Willard. It's just like you can go quote after quote, which you go through all day with your more debate now, but it's also a thing that maybe that rely on the comedy. Like when you see about comedy, you have to see one that made you laugh the most, the one that puts a smile on your face. You see of the Anchorman in your face, you see of the yelling back and forth and the head office when they find out about Monica turning down. And you think of the crowd, some of the most funniest, dumbest line, but that was a joke that you pick up more and repeat you that day classic. I hang out with a bunch of my family before Anchorman all 50 days.
And that's going to be time. Mm-hmm. Alrighty. Now we're going to move on to our 2-minute rebuttals. We're going to go to Aaron first. The time will begin when you start speaking.
Okay, so I might regret this because there is actively a person in the background who is ready to roast and attack me at any second, but I'm going to go for it anyways. When I talk about the 4-year-old version's relatability, I mean that impartial because I think it relates to me. If you've ever seen any stream or video thing that I've ever done, I've never shied away from making jokes about my lack of a romantic life, especially at the moment. But for what it's worth, because I've definitely said it publicly before and I don't fucking care, I am a virgin. But as somebody who grew up in, especially growing up through the 2010s as a teenager in a time where younger and younger people are fucking like rabbits, I kind of can relate to the feelings that Steve Carell is feeling in this movie. The idea of like, is there a point where it almost feels like it's too late, like you've missed the boat, everybody else has done this and I'm the loser who hasn't? And is there that thing, and the anxiety that comes with that at 22 I can relate to. So the idea of still feeling that for another 20 years, reaching the point where he is 40, and the fact that at the start of the film it has completely encased all of his social interactions, like he's hanging out with a group of guys who just want to relax with him and he can't let that guard down because he's worried about the anxiety of it. I think that is an insanely relatable concept. When comparing this movie to Anchorman, I mean, obviously it's subjective to say that the movie's funnier, but what I will say is both of these movies share a lot of cast members, specifically, obviously Steve Carell, Paul Rudd, and Seth Rogen. And I think obviously Rogen's role is bigger in this, to be fair, but I think this movie makes infinite better use of the three of those cast members. And I'm going to take a bit of a second to go into what is, in my opinion, the biggest weakness of Anchorman, which is David Koechner as Champ Kind is one of the worst characters ever written into a comedy. I understand the point of the film is that they are parodying the sexism amongst newscasters, but everything Koechner says in that film is loud, brash, and annoying. And by the time we're on the fourth, like, talking about Christina Applegate's ass, the joke has long been dead, buried, revived, and shot again. And that's his role throughout the whole movie. He actively hurts the others around.
And that's going to be time. Alrighty. Now we're going to go to Chris. Lots of great imagery that was placed in our heads during those 2 minutes. The time will begin when you start talking.
I like video version. I do. I've seen it a few times already that I watched recently. My girlfriend, she liked it a lot. But the film that I remember mostly T-Bell, but not a lot of the other cast members. I think that Anchorman, they used really great use of the cast members as a method of Paul Rudd, Ravel, Steve Carell, James Kirshner, Fred Willard. They used also Ben Fawcett up. Ben Stiller, like you could don't honor the cast. Like, but I think like even with Anchorman, Paul Rudd and Steve Carell are used really well. When you see a quote, you quote a lot of Steve Carell lines. Like, you want to have a party in my pants? Like, I don't know what the other like lamb. I like that. Like, and then like, what a third thing with Steve Carell. He didn't think Anchorman, like, when he, even in this scene, that he had to hand the bird, and he said, oh, the scripture to come in. He doesn't see it now. He actually see the pen getting birds. That's his reaction. It's hysterical. How about thinking, like, like the Death Panther little perfume thing with that whole little gag? One little sideline about the joke that he forgot about, that he can't remember. Like, but it also runs, like, it deals with the sexism, but also made in a way that you can have a good laugh. Right? And yeah, Champ is really annoying character, but he gets a couple of good chuckles, and they don't overuse him. Like, most of the funny stuff, the dumb stuff, are Steve Carell stuff. And that's how they use to motivate Ron Trentoni is great, and like, everybody gets a chance to shine. And but I think for your birthday, it's just because of most of the movie, I think his friends are fine, but he did not add credibility as a comedy acting as 2000. When I think about comedy, I think it's something I should quote. Something when I think of scene from the 2000 that comes to my mind, I think of the Anchorman fight. I think of the crazy scream sequence. I think of the last couple minutes with the bear. I think back to the game, puts off the bridge where Jack Black came in. But it's a big cameo. It was mentioned most of the best scene is Steve Carell alone. And the rest are just like, it's a movie.
And that's going to be time. Alrighty. Here we are. It's a 4-minute open discussion. Whenever one of you guys speak, the time will begin.
So I'm gonna No, you started last time, so I'm going to jump in first this time. And I'm going to say the difference between your movie and my movie is because, again, I don't like shitting on something if I don't think it's bad. Both of our movies are funny. But here's the difference. With your movie, you're referencing lines. You are talking about funny things that they said. With my movie, it is entire characters. Yes, Paul Rudd may not have as memorable a single line as the Sex Panther line in Anchorman, but everything to do with his character and the fact that he is ridiculously strung up on this X. And then as you continue to learn more and more about it throughout the movie, you kind of come to realize, no, he's really not some poor guy who's strung up. He's kind of a fucking creep. And then eventually when you meet Mindy Kaling and learn the situation for real, it's like, that's the building of a proper funny character who can also deliver lines. Just because one of them specifically isn't as memorable as the 60% of the time it works every time doesn't mean the joke isn't as funny. And my thing, I think it's funnier. I'd rather remember characters and concepts than one line I can throw out randomly.
I get over character for your version. I don't think when it comes to comedy, I want to have character. Remember what ultra one you think of? When you think Anchorman, you think of one Burgundy, you think of Lugano, you see a Brick, you see a Camp, you see a Brian, you see ultra get my moment together of my comedy. That can be the life in a great example, just like them jumping out its own, like talking about love. It's something they don't really know much about, and it's a pretty funny moment. Remember, like he is like the underrated comedy comedian bit in the movie. The whole running advocate's done, whether you're talking about the German pornography, when you're talking to the nun on the phone, to the violent Aaron, like, why didn't he brought Aaron to this school and shoot everybody? He got that running gag that gets funnier and funnier as the film go on. And have good punchline. You talk about the Anchorman fight, like, it's a great scene. You got my big camera for Ben Stiller. You got
okay.
Like his hatred of Ron, like later to payoff.
So yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that Anchorman fight. That fight is one of the biggest non sequiturs in a film I've ever seen. It's an excuse to simply just load the movie with a scene full of quick cameos, do some out of place violent things, because the film does have other fight scenes technically, but nothing gets nearly as violent as that. And outside of one, again, another joke where they beat the horse in by the end of it of the, I think Brick murdered someone, you should get a lawyer. Outside of that one joke, it's never referenced again, even when like Mantooth comes back into the film later. It's a non sequitur that's there just to create cameos.
The same thing with every comedy, you get the bizarre statement.
But like 40-Year-Old Virgin has cameos like Kevin Hart, Jonah Hill, you're right. But that movie literally forces half of its cameos into one egregious scene. 40-Year-Old Virgin never does that. It spreads the love and puts in all these people over the course of the film. You don't remember the one scene where everyone showed up. You remember Jonah Hill buying drag boots or Kevin Hart having the like ding off with Romany Malco. They're not all forced into one scene where it's just you're sitting there going, oh fuck, that's Vince Vaughn, that's Luke Wilson, that's Ben Stiller, that's John C. Reilly. You're not sitting there just thinking of names. These people get to have scenes in.
You're getting John C. Reilly confused with the second one. Why? He doesn't show up in the first one. That's a
Who?
John C. Reilly.
He is in the first one. He's the guy that works with the news network that shows up later just to push her into the bear. He's in the first one.
I don't remember it, and I think you can get a different actor.
Don't get hung up on it. We only have a few at a time left. Go ahead, keep going.
But that's the whole point of comedy. It's subjective, but it also, like, when I'm saying my friend, every time about comedy, we record Anchorman every single day. Like, we record I Love Lamp, I Love That. You record character. People, like, introductions to a lot of people was Anchorman before for the Virgin, and the character that you remember, you call ridiculous line. Like, I don't know what we're yelling about. Lord minded. Like, we should go on. Yeah. The fight is fun because it built up to the point that, you know, when Finn Fong shot the hatred from bringing right up to the fight that came out of nowhere. Really just some flashes that were trying everything. And it's just turning you from love and love. Like,
and that's going to be time. Alrighty, now we're going to move on to our closings. You got 1 minute to wrap everything up into a pretty little present to give to the judges. We're going to go Aaron first. Aaron, the time will begin when you start speaking.
Anchorman is a decently funny comedy that has a lot of great one-liners, but it's a comedy that's written in its concept to be a parody of sexism in the workplace in the time that it's set in the 70s. But it's a concept that doesn't really hold up because on top of your characters being sexist, they're also all dumb as bricks, which means they'll never actually learn anything, which is part of the concept of parodying it and attempting to have people grow through the lesson. And also, if I'm being honest, the movie throws its lesson out the window when you have Veronica Corningstone fuck Ron Burgundy, despite the fact that she's made it very well aware that she knows exactly who he is and what he does, and she still gives in anyways. And that is a big flaw in the writing of this film. But with that said, it's a movie that's just mostly known for its punchlines. The 40-Year-Old Virgin is a film that takes its comedy out of very real situations from writing very real characters and still manages to deliver good jokes and good punchlines. And I'd much rather watch something that makes me laugh my ass off, but also makes me think and relate and enjoy the story than something that's going to give me a few memorable lines I can spit out at a party later. If Anchorman's a caricature, 40-Year-Old Virgin is a real film that's also an incredible comedy.
And that's going to be time. Alrighty. Now we're going to move on to Chris. Chris, you got 1 minute. Your time will begin when you start talking.
I tend to point out, like, you talk about the comedy, like, but he doesn't talk about a lot of the characters between Paul Rudd and Steve-O. When I think of comedy, I think of characters that, yeah, punchline, but it also makes you fun. I think what Anime King does best is taking really bizarre culture that make it unique, and you make fun of them at the same time you like them. I mean, Steve-O is a dumb and brick, but he come out very likable at brick, and a lot of his lines does land well. You get like really good character like I really get a bunch of good lines. One thing he does it a different arc at time, but it's something you can see his arc with Veronica to overshot the film that he ended up respecting her to the end and money to save her and everything. Veronica is basically my character. When I think comedy is something also that you should relate to, you should make fun of. At the same time, it's something you should remember at all times. When I think Anchorman, I think of one line, I think all the characters. And I think of the comedy comedy. When I want comedy for the 2000 and I want something that I should laugh out, I remember the end of time. I don't remember as much as the other.
And that's going to be your time. Alrighty. And with that being said, it's time to bring our judges onto the screen. And this time, we're going to start with Andrea. Andrea, who's going to get your point and why?
I would have to go with Aaron again on this one. I think he was able to state a lot more about what makes his movie the best comedy that's released in the 2000s than Chris. I'm gonna give my point to Aaron on this one.
Okay. Now we're going to go to Haven. Haven, who's going to get your point and why?
Again, my point is going to go just like Andrea. I'm going with Aaron. He articulated a lot of points about the Anchorman in his last closing statements. He literally pretty much told you what the plot was without having to watch the movie. Chris never mentioned that in his thing. The only thing Chris kept talking about was the fight scene in the movie. You know, like, I don't know, why would you waste that much time in the debate round talking about the one scene, and he couldn't even really tell you who was in it and why was it so memorable. Like, and just Aaron just, nailed it on the head when he kept saying that his movie was more of a whole character study, development, and he kept bashing it in that Anchorman's just good for his one-liner. So I had to go with Aaron.
Alrighty. And with that, Aaron has a 2-0 lead. Chris, you're going to have to score on this next round or you're going to be knocked out. So no pressure. Now we're going to move on to our third question of the match. And it is in the category of musicals. The movies we all love. And the question is, what is the most overrated musical of all time? We're going to start with you first, Chris. So your 1 minute will begin when you start talking.
So, as a lot of people know, I am a musical fanatic. I love musical. I watch any musical movie. But there's one musical that I never get to understand love for, that get on my nerve so much. It's 1971 Grease, starring Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta. It's a musical that I respect it. The song come out really annoying. It's something you hit every single day. And especially when you have, like, I think it's a little like United High School, but also message towards the end that nobody had the biggest weakness in the movie leading up to a decent point with the Danny thing. That she decided to change herself so she could win over Danny. That's not a good message to send to any girl. And it's a clear weakness that ruined the film. I think the song really one note and annoying at the time. I think the character either come off unlikable or douchebag. I think Danny not a great lead character. I think the only decent character original, but she goes through the arc and makes you fun of Danny. Then suddenly turning a new sympathize her
And that's going to be time. All righty. Now we're going to move on to Aaron. Aaron, your time will begin when you start talking.
All right, first off, that is sacrilege because Grease is the word. You know what's not the word? The Greatest Showman. This is a movie that came out a few years ago that a lot of people seem to really enjoy. And while I think at best it's fine, I've never understood the love behind this film. The Greatest Showman is a period piece musical that tells the story of P.T. Barnum, except it's none of those things. It's not a period piece because the musical is too glittery and pop influenced to actually feel like it's from that time. The immersion within the film is broken every time they start singing because these songs are so modern that it doesn't feel like it's something that would happen in the context of the film. It's also not really a film about P.T. Barnum in that the movie tries to have its cake and eat it too, in that it wants to go into the stuff about P.T. Barnum and talk about why he's a bad guy, but instead of ever actually talking about it, they just reference it and then go to a pop song instead. So just on all levels of what this film is trying to achieve, I don't think it works.
Time. Ladies and gents, this is the moment you're waiting for. Okay, now we're going to move on to Chris. Chris, your 2 minutes will start as soon as you start talking.
So the question is the most overrated musical at the time. At the moment, Greatest Showman has a 57 critics score. 86 audience rating. So it's evenly out up to the point where I would argue Greatest Showman more underrated than overrated. I don't hear the amount of love for it as much I hear for Glee. Every Halloween I see people dress up Glee or the Pink Lady. I hear the song on the radio all the time. I hear Burn the Hand Dry. I hear Standing a lot. I hear You the One That I Want. Here we go together a lot. And then over here, beginning a prequel movie and a prequel show coming out in the next couple of years. We had Big Slide that came out. But they all, and the stereotype itself because trying to show that you have to be yourself. Then the last act, after the comedy scene, Danny decided to change himself to win Danny over. Where Danny decided to actually become a better person, and it threw everything that went well about it out the window. You can't argue about the parents for good. I don't mean argument, but though, take some character, but they spent the show at that she hates Danny. She made fun of her at the slumber party, and then the right thing that I did come up, and you expect to sympathize with her. That she get pregnant. But it's a talk like that thing. Going out the door, like a moment later to the end. And it does not work. I mean, I think it's an okay movie that people that are love to. My parents named my sister after loving you to John Tate to that movie. Like, it just, in a movie that I respect, but I think it does not get the love that it wants. I think Greatest Showman is a really good movie. I think I get what you say about him being evil, but it's a fun pop culture movie that got respectable rating at the end. The critic gave it the respectable rating. The audience, I know for a lot of people that like it but don't love it, but everybody I talked to loved it. It was the highest grossing musical for why it won one of the best selling soundtrack out there. The nominated for Hopefully Divorced to you. It still has a call for you. When you try to top 10 this all time.
And that's going to be time. Alrighty, now we're going to go on to Aaron. You got 2 minutes. The time will begin when you start talking.
Okay, so most of your criticisms towards Grease are about the cultural withstanding outside of the film. Most of what you've talked about in terms of the film itself is how basically the ending doesn't hold up in your opinion. I'm going to spend the bulk of my time talking about why it does hold up, because if you actually look at what the movie does throughout its entire project, Grease isn't something that's aged poorly. It was actually something that was ahead of its time when it came out. Grease is a movie about opening yourself up in whatever mannerism that means. Throughout the entire movie, there are things laid into it that show you that our leading characters, specifically the leading four of Danny, Sandy, Kenickie, and Rizzo, are not who they put themselves out to be. They're all more vulnerable. They're more reserved. They're not as tough in the case of the T-Birds as they claim to be. And these are things that are put in the movie both very blatantly and very minorly. For you, just as an example, Kenickie is a character that's portrayed like some kind of lady killer, like he's this tough guy. But the movie very heavily implies in the scene where they realize the condom breaks that he's a virgin, because the line he says is, "I've had this in my wallet for 7 years." Or since the 7th grade. Who does that except for virgins? That's very clearly what they're implying. At the end of the film, specifically with Sandy, what she does is set up. She is, from the very first scene of the movie, they tell you she is scared of the idea of sex. When she is with Danny on the beach and he begins kind of leaning into her more, she pushes him back and says, "I don't want to ruin a beautiful moment." And his response is something along the lines of, "Why does it have to ruin it? It could make it better." This is what she is scared of, and this is why they make fun of her throughout the whole film. At the end, when she sees Danny embrace his true self in the race, where he is the tough guy and is no longer playing the tough guy, she embraces who he is. If you pay attention to that scene, it's not just, oh, she's dressed sexy. She is now dominating him. She has embraced her sexuality, and she is in control of herself and the situation. This is a concept that was way ahead of its time for the 50s when the movie is set, and was ahead of its time even in the 70s when it was made. And I think people in the 21st century are so quick to look at things on the outside and prejudge it that they don't see the meaning behind it.
And that's going to be time. Alrighty. Now it's the 4-minute open discussion. Whenever one of you speaks, the time will start.
I think Grease is a fine movie. I do. But I think at the same time, it's like Danny, as you say, she's trying to be herself. Like, what Danny fall in love with her is who she is. Like, they're trying to change the fact to become the person that she doesn't want to be, the person one is, and what she thinks Danny, and she was trying to. But I also learned that what Danny, I think, goes through, that he tried to become a better man. Like, about breaking in, he decided to join the track, decided to do other things that, like, so that he could be a better person to Sandy. Like, that he had to content. I think the song, I think the song is.
I think you're
they
putting.
know at the same time repeating each other, right? We go together and a bunch of that repeating line after line, and it, when you hear a repeat on the radio a lot, it really annoying. I think Greatest Showman, the love the song up really good. I think this to me is one of the most beautiful.
Yeah, okay, so I'm going to go back to the point for Grease in a minute. But with The Greatest Showman, the point I'm getting at is the songs are too good. Pasek and Paul, who wrote the songs for the film, previously had done La La Land. And there's a moment in La La Land where John Legend plays a jazz song. And it's a song you're supposed to hate, but the scene doesn't work because the song is so well overproduced that it doesn't work for the moment they're trying to put it in the movie. All of The Greatest Showman is like that. These songs are so overproduced that there's a reason they made a pop cover soundtrack afterwards. The songs don't fit the movie. They don't fit the time period. They don't fit the type of movie they're making. And the movie goes from being this supposed drama to then moving into this overproduced pop soundtrack. Now, to get to what you were talking about with Grease, because I don't want to let that go for a second. Again, I think you're putting your own kind of feeling on how they are portraying the characters into it, in the sense that you're saying that Danny is trying to become a better man. That's not what that really is. They're both going on a personal journey to be who they think the other person wants to be. The whole movie is about society, like societal in terms of high school pressure. Danny acts like a dick because he wants to fit in with his buddies. He thinks his buddies' opinions matter. He tries to change himself because he believes Sandy's thing matters. But Sandy only really falls back in love with him when he becomes himself again at the end of the film. And so she embraces the stuff that she didn't want to embrace, which is wanting to be with him. And she does it through dressing up for him, the same way that he dresses up for her with the Letterman's jacket.
But I think at the same time, when we talk about overrated musical, so let's really talk about how oversaturated most of the movie are. Greatest Showman, I live in a theater community world myself. I've been surrounded by theater friends. Greatest Showman got okay with off my friend. I know people that like it. I don't get as much love for it as I hear for Green. I think any production fancy movie put
Well,
on like
okay.
every single I think a bunch of top 10 best musical movies all the time. This is right near the top. When you talk about overrated musical, you think of something that people overhype, people that talk about all the time. People put like Olivia Newton-John and John Stewart
But The Greatest Showman's been around for 4 years, and Grease has been around for 40 years. So
but that's
the fact that The Greatest
that
Showman,
we can't really call Greatest Showman overrated yet until we see the next couple of years.
okay, so can you to go to your point, a movie that came out earlier this year that you loved is I forget what it's called, In the Heights. You loved In the Heights. I know you did. We've talked about it. In the Heights would not probably go into most people's top 10 of all time, even if they loved it, because it's so new. It's recency bias. That stuff takes time. Grease is a film that deserves its status because it is as good as people say it is, and it's had 40 years to gestate in the public consciousness. The Greatest Showman made a shit ton of money at the box office and it's had everyone singing its soundtrack for the last few years, but the movie itself does not justify the success it's had.
But Grease is a one-trick pony that's still going on today. We're getting a TV show. We're getting a prequel movie at the same time.
Yeah, 40 years after.
Yeah, but it's still something that is oversaturated. People need to talk about it.
How is it oversaturated? A failed sequel, a live thing on television 30 years later.
And that's going to be time. All right. Now we're going to go into our final minute to get everything wrapped up. We're going to take a chill pill for a minute. We're going to calm down. Okay.
What you mean?
Okay, Chris. My anxiety is getting crazy right now, but it's okay. You have a minute. The time will begin when you start speaking. Please don't kill Aaron, and I would ask the same thing to Aaron. It's too much money to pay for all the legal stuff.
So I think we are looking at that when it comes to questions about what overrated musical all the time is. It's something that's been around for a while that people talk about to today. We've been around for 40 years, like you said, but every single day you turn on the radio, especially during the 70s, you hear You Don't Want What I Want. You hear a bunch of these songs pop on the radio. You see people dressed up with Pizza Pink Lady. You see a bunch of people, and maybe that's trying to be something, that's trying to say something, and then it fall on the ground to the end with the artist standing. I don't know what you're going through the art, but I think especially with the message it's trying to convey to Joe that standing, especially today, is a really awful message. I think the song Okay at Best, Annoying at Worst, I think You're the One That I Want and We Go Together get really repetitive and annoying at the same time. I think Greatest Showman, but yes, it did not portray P.T. Barnum well. It's its own fictional world, and everything was based on a true story. Song that you relate to, character you relate to. Give it time, it might be overrated, but right now it's really funny. It's like a 57 watch the
And that's going to be time. Alrighty. Aaron, you have a minute. The time will begin when you start talking.
Okay, the reason Grease is in the pop culture zeitgeist the way it is because it is good enough to hold up over that amount of time. The movie itself is really well written, well acted, well directed. The soundtrack is great. The movie has only really had the original musical, the movie based on it, a fucking awful sequel, and a staged live production years later. That's not really a lot to go with a franchise, but yet that movie still has insane staying power. The problem with The Greatest Showman isn't that they don't tell the story of P.T. Barnum properly. It's the fact that they try and have their cake and eat it too. I would respect the movie more if it just glossed over all the bad shit he did and made it a fun pop movie about, the creation of the circus, but it's not that. It's a movie that tries to get into the bad stuff that he did and tries to look down on him, but instead of ever using its brilliant cast of multiple award nominees, it brushes over it with a pop song every single time. It's not a great movie. It's an overproduced soundtrack that sounds good on a radio, and when it comes together, you make something that doesn't deserve the love it has received in the last few years.
And that's going to be time. Alrighty. Now we're going to kick you guys off screen, and we're going to bring in the judges. So we're going to start with Haven first. Haven, who are you going to give the point to and why?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Me?
Yeah, you. Yeah.
Yeah, things acting. Anyway, all right. Yeah, that was probably the closest round so far. Both of these guys really bring their A game in that round. I'm just gonna give the point to Chris. They never really talked about the movie, even in the battle segment. Nobody gave a shit about The Greatest Showman. So, they all talked about Grease the whole time. I'm gonna give it to Chris this time. Grease.
Okay. Now we're going to move on to Austin. Austin, buddy, who are you going to give the point to and why?
I think that because they ignored The Greatest Showman, kind of went more to Chris getting the point, because Chris hammered, I think, more of the actual question of overrated and how perpetuated it is in pop culture showing up on all these lists, and he was trying to tear it down a little more. I think he kind of properly put into perspective how perfectly mediocre The Greatest Showman is. So to me, Chris got the point because he stuck to the question and argued the question.
All right. And that means Chris is going to get the point. So tell me where you want to go. You guys will go to the back. We're going to bring back Aaron and Chris, and we're going to move on to round number 4.
I have to say, sorry, Pez. I didn't sit here listing actors, but I did, try to defend the opposite pick. He didn't mention my movie because he had no defenses of it. Think about that, guys. But here's what it is. Keep it going.
Okay. You know what? That's why you lost a point, because you went with the best comedy of all time. Should have went with like La La Land. But anyway, I digress. Now we're going to move on to question number 4, and it is in the category of, I believe, Marvel. Marvel comic, one of them, I don't know. But the question is, what is the most underrated film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? And this time, we're going to start with Aaron. So, Aaron, who or what movie did you go with and why? Your time will begin when you start talking.
All right. Okay. So when we're talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I think we fall into a very weird situation where there are the list of movies, it's a long list of movies that are great. And I think those movies are beloved the way they are. And then I think there's a list of films that are very mediocre. And I think those films are probably loved about as much as they should be, with the odd person here or there who might love it more than the rest. However, there is a film that I think is kind of put into that second pile that truly does deserve to be in the first. And I know it's the controversial answer for most people, but my answer is Iron Man 3. The reason I think Iron Man 3 is the most underrated film is because anytime somebody criticizes it, like they say they don't like it, and you ask them, well, why don't you like it? They all point to the same moment, which is the scene where the twist is played out, where it's revealed that Ben Kingsley as the Mandarin is not the Mandarin. He is Trevor Slattery, a British drunken actor, and how it destroyed the Mandarin. Well, if that's the only takedown people really have of this film, now that they've fixed that with Shang-Chi, here is an underappreciated movie with far more strengths and weaknesses to be observed.
And that's going to be time. All righty. Now we're going to move on to Chris. Chris, the time will begin when you start speaking.
So I want to go back a couple, many years to Phase 1, actually 2008. The first Iron Man came out, everybody loved it, and then there was this little movie that came out in between. It had kind of controversy backstage. But actually, it was a really good movie that we watched recently that held up pretty well. It is an incredible film. I think it's a film that really explored Bruce Banner and the Hulk really well. The way they use the Hulk at times is really well done. I think Abomination is arguably one of the better Phase 1 villains. I think Tim Watts is really good, and it's on Dante, some very creepy, menacing. He had some really creepy moments, especially with Tim Blake Nelson. I think most of the comedy were, I think the Great Stanley cameo. I think Lonely Heart is really good. I think Untitled really good. But then from that, it's controversy because everyone knows and the script issue, and nobody talks about it anymore. It's like the last sheet on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think when you see it on the radio, you see the film nobody talks about. And when you go back and watch it, it's a pretty good movie. The fight sequence are amazing, especially if better at home.
And that's going to be time. Alrighty. Now we're going to go to Aaron for his rebuttal. The time will begin when you start speaking.
Okay, so with Iron Man 3, we get, honestly, in my opinion, one of the best performances from Robert Downey Jr. in the MCU because it is the truest emotional journey for his character of Tony Stark. Following all of his experiences in Iron Man, following all of his experiences in Iron Man 2, following what he went through in the Avengers, we have reached a point where the snarky playboy millionaire is kind of starting to crack a little bit. He's suffering from PTSD from the things he's experienced. He's having trouble adapting to natural life. His relationships are kind of falling apart a little bit. And we see him at his most vulnerable in this movie. And I think Robert Downey Jr. gives a legitimately alongside with the film, it's an underrated performance. He really brings a dramatic edge to this film that portrays the kind of mental issues that Tony Stark is going through in a believable way. Because honestly, yeah, I know that PTSD is like a mental illness is something that's kind of onset over time. It necessarily wouldn't snap in the way that it does with him, where all of a sudden he just has it. But if you went through what he went through, which includes multiple times of almost death and flying up through a wormhole into deep space and almost not making it back, that would affect you in a really weird way. And we get to see that play out. We also get the interactions between him and Ty Simpkins as Harley Keener, which is kind of a predecessor to what we got later with him and Peter Parker. In we get to see Tony Stark, who never had a proper father figure in his life because him and his father were always at odds with each other. We get to see him try and be the father figure and kind of look after this kid for a little bit while he's helping him get back on his feet. We also get to see Tony's abilities without the armor. That's one of the big things with Iron Man is he's not superpowered. The armor is his superpower. When he breaks into the Mandarin's base, we get to see him go in with just his brains, his wit, and what he can come up with on the fly. And I think it's some of the most interesting action that's been put together with Tony. And when you build that all together with the brilliant character stuff, I think we get a film that does a lot for this character that's been forgotten about, even though it has remained.
And that's going to be time. All right. Now we're going to go to Chris. Chris, the time will begin when you start talking.
I think it's saying I really like both of these movies a lot. I think Iron Man getting a love it now with changing and it kind of overthrew it over underrated aspect. I think Incredible Hulk still had yet to find that footing. A movie that actually does well, not light on action a lot. It does well with the character drama of Bruce Banner and the Hulk itself, him struggling to find the cure. To Karen the Hulk did a great moment of silence, especially when he gets the flare that could potentially lead to the cure and the disappointing fate. Like him and Red Charlie actually does have pretty decent chemistry. I think that if they back you a villain hurt as this guy that hell bent getting Bruce Banner no what that he think of him and American property. He with that line he say I know a lot of people say phase one it had villain problem. I think Tim Ross, despite he not in the movie a lot, is a really good villain. He come on face, be very interesting. His one-on-one battle with the Hulk before and after Abomination great. Like to some of the best Hulk moment we had yet to see besides the first Avengers War, like the Hulk smash and the little hand family thing. I think it had really good directing for look like and I think it's the love now that Iron Man 3 getting things to get to a bunch of other things and making that. I think we're getting Abomination now and She-Hulk. We saw him briefly in safety, but nobody talked about it. I've been around the community for a long time. Incredible Hulk is the best sheep of the family because people forget about it. When they see the Hulk, they think I have Mark Ruffalo more than Edward Norton. And everyone did like one performer alone does so much with the Hulk more than I think Mark Ruffalo does. It shows dimension, it shows the complexity and now that's charisma. What they don't more with Mark Ruffalo, like the struggle he had, instead of not making him like the comic relief at times beside Ultron. I think they does so well in that one movie alone. And some of the best action sequence besides that in phase one, the hollow fight and the hollow campus fight is really well shot, incredibly intense. Very well executed. Great use of the whole, especially the Berlin thing where they use.
And that's going to be time. All righty. Now we're going to move on to the 4-minute open debate. Whenever one of you guys starts talking, your time will begin.
Hey, I have
Okay,
to
so
say,
I'm
I
gonna
have
I'm
to
gonna
be
jump in
arguing
real quickly
too.
and just say that I think The Incredible Hulk is rated exactly where it needs to be. At the end of the day, it's not a bad film. It's a perfectly fine film, but compared to the rest of the MCU, it's not good enough in quality alone to jump it up the list. It falls into a lot of the same traps that early MCU films did. It's a lot of exposition and establishing. Tim Roth is a fine actor, but he's not given a lot to do with the character of Emil Blonsky, and then he ends up falling into the "you're the exact same thing as the hero, but bad" thing with the Abomination. There's absolutely nothing to that character that makes him interesting outside of Tim Roth, but also it's a movie that more than any other film has been rendered completely useless in the context of the MCU. Only one character has really ever come back from it, and he's never referenced anything. It's so forgotten in the context of the MCU that when Thunderbolt Ross and Hulk were in the same room in Infinity War, he didn't even acknowledge him. That's how little this film matters. So its quality isn't good enough to give it that natural boost, and it doesn't matter. So why would you go back to it? It's perfectly rated as an average film.
You kind of make my point. The question of what is the most underrated film, the fact that nobody talks about it makes it really underrated, underappreciated for the MPI. I think people complain all the time about phase one. I would argue I think Tim Roth does really good job. He had the intensity, especially the thing with him and Tim Blake Nelson, he demanding Tim Blake Nelson and the whole thing to make him stronger.
Well, first off,
he wanted to talk like that he going through the art that he wants to get better and stronger than the Hulk. You get that when he first see the Hulk briefly in Berlin. He said, I want that. And then you see him get frustrated more and more and they call it campus fight. And up to the point like I need to become stronger than Hulk. It's way too really great. Arguably one of the better end fight, the better than Iron Man, better than Thor, as they put up there with the great final fight between the Abomination and the Hulk. I think I actually don't decently hold up when you rewatch. I think, especially with the Berlin thing and the color temperature, the CGI is really good. And that's the Hulk I kind of really want more than the Hulk.
One or two action scenes that are cool doesn't make a great movie. The rest of the movie around it, hold on, you had over a minute. The rest of the movie around it is not the best. It's average. Just because it's not talked about doesn't mean it's worthy of being talked about more. Whereas Iron Man 3 is. Whether people realize it or not, in terms of impact in the MCU, Iron Man 3 has had a substantial impact on films going forward. Now, the big thing everybody writes off is, oh, well, they burned the suits and then they were brought back. Yes, because he's fucking Iron Man. How could you not do that? But in terms of Tony's mental state, that plays into his actions in Ultron. It plays into his actions in Civil War. It plays into his actions in Infinity War. And then as far as Endgame, wanting to just be completely reclusive and take himself out of everything because he's reached the point where from all the trauma he suffered early on and then attempting to mend that trauma by creating these fixes that don't work, he now feels like it's just better if he's not involved at all and it's all about protecting him. It has an impact. Hulk doesn't mean shit, and it's an okay film with a couple decent action scenes.
Right, so as I said, I think Iron Man 3 is a really good movie. I think it actually well liked by the fan community. It takes out the
But it's not.
thing.
It's not well liked. It's one of the most notorious films because of one twist. Nobody ever talks about the rest of that film.
Okay, I was like, do you like the film? People say they do like the film. And like, I do think the action scene is fine, everything fun. When I see all the film, I think film nobody talks about it. It kind of bothered me because it came out after Iron Man. And it's one of the lowest grossing Marvel movies, one of the lowest rated Marvel movies, where argument make it underrated. Before the Eternal came out, but it's just like it's a film that when you look at it, the character drama, the courage of the whole kid, it gets a lot better than they do in any of the Avengers movie, or any of the Hulk appearance. But him loneliness, him struggling to find a cure and to find happiness. You get that with the like Tyler stuff, like him watching from afar. You get probably a better performance from William Hurt and Thunder War.
And that's going to be time. All righty. Now we're going to move on to your closing arguments. We're going to start off with Aaron. Aaron, your time will begin when you start talking.
Okay, this is going to seem like a bit of a tangent, but a few years ago, there was a Jason Bateman film that came out called Bad Words. It was a perfectly bare bones, mediocre comedy that came out like 6 or 7 years ago, and no one's really talked about it since. That's because it's a fucking mediocre film. If something isn't underrated just because it's not talked about. Hulk isn't talked about because as a film, it's completely inconsequential to the MCU. The two characters that have come back from it look completely different, and Hulk's journey is really more established in the latter films continuing forward than I would say anything that directly came from this. Iron Man 3 may be talked about more, but it's in a negative light, and that's what makes it underrated. People talk about this film negatively because of one thing that happens in it, and I understand comic fans hurt against it, but they are completely discrediting and misjudging an entire rest of a film because one decision that was made. And in my opinion, that was a great decision for the film that made it one of the most unique entries. It's well acted, it's well directed, it's well written, it has a lot of heart and emotion, and it is not talked about in the light that it deserves to be when it comes to MCU films. Hulk is fine.
And that's going to be time. Okay. Now we're going to go to Chris. Chris, you're going to have 1 minute. The time will begin when you start talking. The timer's acting really crazy, but we're going to go with it.
Alright, so I thought you had a little bit about Iron Man 3. I think a movie that pretty well established by fans, especially not at the same thing. I think when you talk to fans outside of Man Fit, they really like the action scene, they like the comedy. But when you ask about Hulk, you're like, oh, you're talking about Ruffalo? No, nobody talked about Never Nothing. And what he done with one film alone, I think he did more to good fan of the Hulk more than I think what Ruffalo does in one movie alone. I think he brings the emotion complex. The moment of indecision, the moment of you just see the struggle in faith. And some of the kind of does what the great Stanley cameo. I think Tim Roth arguably should be in the intro of some of the better villains from Phase 1 up there with others, I think. And the fact because of the controversy and the backstage drama where everyone knows him dropping out the last minute, contributed for Dr. Film Black Sheep, the movie that should be more well-liked and more underrated than it is. And if that's the conversation, what is the more underrated film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Hulk Smash is the Incredible Hulk. Yeah, and my point, I might think it's virtually low as it is, especially after changing Hulk nothing.
And that's going to be time. Alrighty. We're going to kick you guys off, and we're going to bring our judges back. So we're going to start with Austin. Austin, who are you going to give the point to and why?
Some good fights here in these last couple rounds. Would you say, Matt? They've really picked it up. But this one, I think my criticism last round gave Aaron the boost to stick to the question, and he did a good job of sticking to the question, and he won the argument this time. Good job, Aaron.
Hey,
good job, buddy.
Aaron. Hey, yippee. All right, now we're going to move on to Andrea. Who are you going to give the point to and why?
I'm going to have to also give this point to Aaron again, just because he was able to state the difference between Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk in terms of movie quality and why his movie is more underrated than the Incredible Hulk in terms of how the viewers perceive the said movie. So I'm going to give Aaron the point in this one.
Alrighty. And with that being said, of this match is Aaron Connole.
I'm about as happy as this as you are, apparently.
Yeah, so Aaron, how did it feel to cheat in this match?
Fucking back. Okay. All right. What was the question? How did it feel to cheat?
Yeah, how did it feel to cheat?
I wouldn't define cheating as being told an hour and 16 minutes ago that you're going to have to debate and then winning cheating. But it felt good to play. Chris got thrown into the middle of an absolute clusterfuck of a situation, and he gave his absolute best, despite the fact that as much as, my answers had minimal prep time, he obviously had very minimal prep time to respond to my answers. I think he did a great job. I think my score reflects that I did a great job, no matter what you condescending pricks say. And go ahead. And
you did a great job facing somebody in the 0-1 bracket. I mean, let's put it into perspective here. I mean, you weren't facing me or Joe or And just a word of advice, man. I mean, the first road to getting laid is being a little bit of a handyman and fixing your damn light behind you. I mean, Jesus, no girls want to come into that room right there. I mean, come on. Yeah. Let's put a little effort into this.
All right. And with that, boys, Well, I do appreciate your time here tonight. I've played your little fucking game. I've played into it, and now, respectfully, especially to you, Matt, because I work with you, we'll deal with this later. Get the fuck out of my match. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and bring Chris into this. Chris, we'll figure out something later, man. I feel bad. I feel like I owe you one. This was not your fault that any of this happened. But again, I have to give you a major kudos, brother. You did the absolute best you could out there. How are you feeling, at least?
I'm feeling good. Like, this was a battle I respect because I understand you winning the point because I actually agree with them most of the time after listening to this argument. Like, there's stuff I can improve on. But I feel like this was, you have a great opponent to face, actually. It's not just for.
Thank you.
Like, we actually had good back and forth, especially with the musical and the Hulk. Like, back and forth all good game.
Absolutely. Yeah, and like I said, we'll figure out something for you. I will get you a match as soon as I can once we're out of this tournament, just to get you back in and make up for whatever the fuck it was that happened tonight. But I guess because I played Jordan and I won, I guess that theoretically means I move on in the tournament, which feels like a thing I should be saying with like a smile on my face, because usually the guy who runs it's the prick that puts himself in it on purpose. And this, yeah, okay. Well, unfortunately for Mr. Howell's impression of me, I won't be playing a former champ in the next round, although for what it's worth, neither Matt in this go around have played former champs either. But I will be playing Noah McCausland, who did just beat a former champ in Jacob West to move into the next round. And that'll be interesting. I love Noah. He's a great guy. He lives, assuming where he lives in a city I'm not going to mention, he's like probably 35 minutes from my house. And he works at Universal, which is really cool. So it's going to be a fun match. And I hope that it's not as much of a clusterfuck. I will certainly be making sure that's not there.
I am rooting for you. You did well. Like, you did bring the energy you brought to this. Even against someone like me, you did do well. Like, I actually think you really impressed me this today.
Well, thank you. We're going to go ahead and close this one out. Yeah, this happened. Thank you guys for watching. Please be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe. Support the channel. Support Movie Battleground. I promise they're not all as weird and passive aggressive as this one is. And be sure to stick around because we only have one more match in the 0-1 bracket left, and that is a match in which two former competitors, now rookies, are being subbed in. Linus Babcock versus Ethan Klein. That will happen next week as a part of our third double upload event. Maybe by the time it airs, I'll have a name for that event. And then we're done with this bracket, and for these fifth round, and we'll be on to the next round of matches. But with all that said, on behalf of my fellow producers, minus Matt Beer, on behalf of our great judges tonight, minus Austin Howell, and on behalf of Mr. Chris Diaz, Chris, why don't you go ahead and sign off for Movie Battleground?
See you all later. Have a good night. And stay safe, everybody. And thank you for the next match.